No one expected that on the edge of the white ocean, where the horizon dissolved in the haze of the polar day, traces would remain of a project mentioned only in whispers in forgotten archives. We could not believe that beneath the frozen wind and layers of permafrost lay a story the war had carved and then concealed, as if the tundra itself had taken on the role of guardian. The North had been silent for decades. Its silence was dense as ice and just as opaque. That silence finally cracked when an expedition team, guided by rare meteorological notes and grainy satellite images, reached a place long erased from maps. Before them stretched a broken landscape, streaks of snow, black moraine stones, and twisted Arctic willow. In the distance, their eyes caught unnatural geometry, half-buried ridges, and rust-colored silhouettes of crates and drums. Scientific reports of the Arctic usually list only ice, birds, and coordinates. Here, to those coordinates, a shadow was added. The wind slid across metal fragments, bringing a dry taste of salt, though the sea stood still. Pieces of cable disappeared into frozen soil. Shards of wood, polished like bone, lay scattered. Sheets of metal with bolt holes hinted at an antenna. Too many details pointed to deliberate human work, old and carefully hidden by snow. Measurements revealed preserved timber just beneath the surface, floorboards, beams, and traces of walls. It was clear that once, a station had stood here. Wartime history of the Arctic is often reduced to convoys and storms, yet weather data meant life or death. War demanded forecasts as much as ammunition. Those who measured air temperature spoke the language of isobars, and in their notes lay the future courses of ships and aircraft. Archives mentioned expeditions into empty latitudes and code names concealing huts and masts. Beneath the dry precision of those records lived the discipline of cold. Here, that same discipline was tangible. The geometry of the site, the trench for cable, the remains of a crate for an optical device or meteorological probe. On the coastal shallows stood thick metal drums, still intact, their rusted sides bearing faint Latin letters and numbers fuel markings. Farther inland lay charred beams spaced evenly like foundations for generator decking. Oil stains suggested engines had worked long and hard. Under weak sunlight glinted shards of thick green glass from old lamp covers. Documentary accuracy demanded restraint, yet each detail carried weight. Cataloging began. Every object mapped and numbered. Beneath gravel were metal strips with bolt holes, likely parts of an antenna base. In a shallow trench lay a cracked cable beside porcelain insulators stamped with a manufacturer's mark. These details left no doubt. This had been a permanent radiometeorological outpost. From the snow, they extracted a warped box with greened brass clasps. Inside were fragments of paper, dense as thin cardboard, with faint traces of text. They were sealed immediately to preserve them. In the Arctic, each confirmation is labor. The wind numbed fingers even through gloves. Instruments had to be warmed against the body. Photography required a tripod to prevent distortion. Snow was removed layer by layer to preserve the order of deposits. Small finds were bagged and numbered. The goal was precision, yet the emptiness itself added quiet drama. Every object implied a vanished routine. Schedules, signals, and silence. As excavation widened, the picture grew clear. The station lay shallow beneath the snow, a corridor below surface level, rooms lined with planks, recesses for crates. One floor section was reinforced with a thick beam meant for heavy machinery. The layout was functional, built for isolation. From fragments of packaging, the team deduced that supplies included dry food, canned goods, and technical oils. On one sheet of metal, faint numbers dated the site to 1942, 1944, the years when Arctic weather forecasts were strategically vital. The Arctic neither destroys quickly nor preserves kindly. Everything hangs on a knife's edge. A brief thaw can turn paper to pulp, so every movement was deliberate. They set up a temporary lab, sealed containers, clean blades, soft light. The team worked like archaeologists, each wrong motion, risking the loss of evidence. Geological instability made it worse. Any crack in the permafrost could swallow the structure whole. Gradually, logic emerged. The cable line led to where a mast must have stood. Low remnants of walls shielded a platform from the wind. Nearby was a depression shaped like a shelter for a sled or tracked vehicle. When a snow-packed area was cleared, a rectangular object appeared, rounded edges, corroded surface, empty inside. By shape, it was the casing of a field radio receiver. The missing dial glass revealed only darkness and fragments of lamp mounts. Even emptiness was proof the station had once spoken through the air. Off to the side, a bent metal rod was found, perhaps part of a utility tool or defensive weapon, though no traces of battle existed. No shells, no burns, only strict geometry and careful economy of metal. Each new find thickened the reconstruction. A daily rhythm took form. Wake up by the clock, data checks, generator start, antenna adjustment, temperature, pressure, humidity, and cloud readings, followed by transmission. Wind, ice, and silence were the only constants. A journal entry might have seemed dry, but that dryness was truth. No names yet, only coordinates and signs. German manufacturing marks, wartime engineering, the discipline of secrecy. The fragments aligned into a picture that chilled the air. By the end of the first day, the site resembled a blueprint. Straight trenches, dark patches of metal, numbered markers vanishing beneath the snow. The silence of the north had changed, no longer empty, but charged. Evidence of a secluded World War II base had surfaced, absent from official maps, yet fitting perfectly into the logic of that era: weather data, convoys, and coded reports. No one expected the proof to be so tangible. We could not believe how persistently the land itself had remembered. By the second week of work, the Arctic base began to take shape, not just as a collection of rusted objects, but as a pattern of purpose. What had first appeared as random debris now revealed the outline of an organized installation, compact, functional, and unmistakably military. Beneath layers of compacted snow, the excavation exposed the remains of a rectangular foundation with reinforced corners, ideal for a prefabricated shelter. Sections of corroded aluminum tubing suggested ventilation shafts. Every new find confirmed that this was more than a simple weather post. It had been a fully operational station built for secrecy and endurance. Archival hints had long suggested that during the height of the war, several such Arctic weather outposts were established by German naval and air forces. They served as nodes in a vast meteorological network stretching from Norway to the Barents Sea, feeding critical weather data to command centers in Europe. Accurate forecasts determined convoy routes, air operations, and submarine patrols. The Arctic, empty and merciless, had become a battlefield of barometers and radios. The objects found on site followed that same logic. One metal plate bore a partially legible serial number beginning with H43, matching wartime registry codes for field equipment issued by the Kriegsmarine. Nearby, fragments of a broken compass, housing, and a corroded pressure gauge lay half embedded in the ice. Under magnification, markings in Gothic script became visible, small but decisive. The team now had material proof that the station belonged to the German weather network of the early 1942. Further north of the main site, ground-penetrating radar detected a hollow zone beneath 2 meters of ice and gravel. When cleared, it revealed a partially collapsed chamber, its interior sealed by decades of frost. Inside, frozen in place, lay fragments of wooden crates, twisted sheets of metal, and something unexpected: a stack of cylindrical containers wrapped in what looked like waxed canvas. The material had stiffened, but the outlines were intact. Under strict preservation conditions, one container was opened. Inside, protected by grease paper, were reels of magnetic tape, brittle but legible under infrared light. Preliminary inspection showed traces of recorded data, pulsing waveforms consistent with low-frequency radio transmissions. Specialists later confirmed that these could have been fragments of coded weather signals. Each new discovery brought with it both excitement and unease. The Arctic had kept this place untouched for nearly 80 years. There were no bones, no weapons, no sign of conflict, only the meticulous silence of a scientific military operation designed to vanish without trace. Even its location, deep within an uninhabited archipelago, suggested careful selection. The base was far enough from sea routes to avoid detection, yet close enough to transmit signals over the polar cap. Satellite comparison revealed faint rectangular discolorations extending from the site toward the shoreline, like the remains of a runway or sled track. Though erosion had erased most surface detail, the alignment pointed directly north, consistent with polar flight navigation. Historians had long speculated about temporary landing strips used by reconnaissance aircraft during the war. The evidence here fit that hypothesis perfectly. Analysis of soil samples brought further surprises. Traces of synthetic oil additives used in German machinery of the early 1940s were detected, along with micro-residues of combustion typical of generator exhaust. These confirmed that the engines had operated for extended periods, suggesting permanent habitation. The inhabitants had likely rotated in shifts, maintaining radio contact and meteorological reports until evacuation became necessary. But why had the base been abandoned so abruptly? Archival records hinted that many northern outposts had been cut off as the war's tide turned and supply lines collapsed. Some were evacuated under extreme conditions, others simply left to the elements. In this case, the final act seemed deliberate. Equipment stripped, key documents removed, doors sealed. A controlled disappearance. The deeper the team went, the more the site resembled a time capsule of discipline. Under one collapsed beam, they found a small storage compartment containing tin food cans with German inscriptions. Their labels had long since faded, but chemical testing identified contents typical of wartime rations: concentrated meat, biscuits, and powdered milk. Another crate contained fragments of radio valves, some unbroken, wrapped in paper, stamped Funkstel. This single word, radio station, confirmed what had once been only hypothesis. As reports circulated among researchers, media outlets began to take interest. The phrase Hitler's secret Arctic base quickly entered headlines, though historians remained cautious. The evidence spoke of a military installation, but not of mythic weapons or hidden treasures. Its real importance lay in its authenticity, the reconstruction of a forgotten chapter in the logistics of war. The Arctic evening descended in slow motion, turning the horizon into a metallic line between white and gray. The excavation team worked under floodlights, breath freezing in short clouds. The site, quiet and symmetrical, now looked like the footprint of a ghosted civilization. Every wire and beam was being photographed, numbered, stored. Each item removed from the ice was another line of the same cold story, a story not of glory or conspiracy, but of endurance and silence. By the end of the season, the perimeter had been mapped in full, 40 meters long, 22 wide, divided into two sections, living quarters and technical area. A single trench led toward the coast, likely for antenna grounding. Beneath the frozen soil, engineers found the lower section of a mast foundation, a steel socket designed for quick assembly. It was the final proof that the site had indeed transmitted. The world had heard rumors of such places before, but now, for the first time, the evidence was tangible, material, and irrefutable. Beneath the ice, the silence of the North had kept its message sealed for generations. That message was not of power, but of precision, the precision of those who measured clouds for an empire that no longer existed. When the final fragments were catalogued and the site sealed for winter, the Arctic base seemed less a ruin than a preserved equation, evidence of deliberate purpose buried beneath the ice. The discovery reshaped how historians viewed the Northern War, proving that the network of polar weather stations had been broader, more precise, and more advanced than anyone had imagined. Yet behind every verified fact lingered a quiet unease. Each rusted tool, each cable and plate suggested more than meteorology, an attempt to master the chaos of nature itself, to calculate the sky as if it were another battlefield. After the publication of the first reports, historians, engineers, and climatologists from several countries examined the findings. All agreed that the installation had operated between 1942 and 1944 under the codename Schatzgräber, treasure hunter, consistent with other secret German Arctic outposts. Similar bases existed on Svalbard, Greenland, and Franz Josef Land, each staffed by a handful of meteorologists and radio operators who transmitted encrypted weather data to naval headquarters several times a day. Those sterile numbers, temperature, pressure, wind-shaped submarine routes, flight schedules, and convoy paths across the North Atlantic. What made this base unique was its preservation. Unlike others destroyed, scavenged, or eroded, this one had been sealed and protected by permafrost itself. The ice acted as an archive, keeping handwriting visible, paper stiff as bone. Among the recovered artifacts was a strip of photographic film with faint symbols. Under ultraviolet light, it revealed pressure charts annotated with coordinates and initials traced to meteorologists who had served in Norway in 1943. Each mark looked mechanical, yet together they outlined weather as strategy data turned into authority. Weather control was never realized, yet prediction became a weapon. Whoever understood the Arctic skies could anticipate the movements of fleets and storms alike. The men who lived here, isolated for months in darkness, must have known the weight of their work. Their notebooks showed no emotion, only order columns of numbers, lines of code, and absolute discipline. Their precision was endurance, their silence a form of survival. For official history, the story ended with Germany's surrender. For the Arctic, it never truly ended. The discovery reignited debate about the reach of the Reich's science in its final years. Some speculated about hidden laboratories or lost experiments, but the evidence remained concrete. No secret weapons, no treasure, only instruments of measurement and survival. That restraint was what made the site haunting, a monument to endurance, not power. Laboratory tests deepened the narrative. Samples revealed traces of sled dog rations, diesel combustion, and synthetic fabric fibers from cold weather uniforms. Radiocarbon dating confirmed the materials originated in the early 1940s. It was no improvised camp. It had been built to last, a self-contained outpost against the most hostile environment on Earth. A digital reconstruction recreated the interior with striking precision. 2 narrow bunks, a folding table, shelves lined with instruments, a small diesel heater connected to a vent shaft. On one wall hung a large map of the North Atlantic held by rusted tacks. Beside it lay a page of ciphered transmission codes. The reconstruction offered a glimpse of meticulous isolation, where every movement was regulated by the rhythm of measurements. News of the discovery spread quickly. Headlines labeled it Hitler's Arctic Fortress, though the truth was colder and smaller. It was not a fortress, only a link in a vast chain of observation posts, feeding raw data into the war's machinery. Still, the name captured imagination better than any report. Documentaries, interviews, and exhibitions followed. The Arctic, once seen as untouched, became a mirror of forgotten ambitions, its silence now loaded with human intention. To the researchers who uncovered it, fascination turned into reflection. The base raised a larger question. How far can human systems reach into indifferent wilderness before the wilderness answers? The snow that had hidden the outpost for 8 decades had also preserved its warning that precision and ambition can outlive the reasons they were born. In spring, before thawing began, the team returned to collect final samples. The outlines of the base had softened once more, snow settling like a white shroud. Only glints of metal betrayed the structure below. During one last survey, a small tin tag surfaced near the antenna trench. 2 stamped letters, F, G remained legible. Later analysis matched them to Friedrich Gerlach, a meteorologist listed as missing in 1944. His initials gave the site its only trace of identity, a name reduced to metal and frost, but still human. When the expedition withdrew, they left no monument, only coordinates, logs, and data. The recovered artifacts were transferred to a preservation facility, sealed behind glass with traces of rust and ice intact. Scientists continued decoding the surviving recordings, reconstructing fragments of transmitted weather signals. What emerged was not a weapon, but a chronicle of endurance of men who measured the invisible until history itself erased them. Years later, satellites passing above the same coordinates detected faint depressions in the snow where the station once stood. The Arctic had resumed its patient work, smoothing the surface until even memory seemed absorbed. On digital maps, a small label appeared: Historic Weather Station 1943. To most observers, it was only another point in the endless white. To those who had been there, it marked the persistence of silence, the way time itself records what words cannot. The discovery reshaped more than history. It reframed the moral geography of exploration. Even in the world's most remote places, human conflict had drawn invisible lines. The frozen base became a symbol of obsession, the need to measure, predict, and command what will never belong to us. As the last helicopter lifted from the island, a storm gathered over the horizon, low and gray. The wind swept over the cleared site, erasing footprints, filling trenches, covering metal and glass alike. Within hours, the Arctic reclaimed itself, whole and unbroken. What had been uncovered was hidden again, not lost, but returned to the rhythm of ice. The silence of the north descended once more, heavier than before. Beneath it, the evidence endured, a structure without walls, a record without sound, and a truth that still breathes beneath the snow.